The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Alan Blumkin. I'm here with my good friend David Nemec for another session of David Nemec's History and Trivia. And today we're going to be discussing the Giants, Dodgers, Phillies, and Braves teams prior to expansion. Therefore, the original National League teams. And the next time we'll do the Pirates, Reds, Cubs, and Cardinals. Welcome, David.
Welcome to you, Al. It's a pleasure to be with you once again.
Same here. It always is. Okay. Where do you want to start? Which team?
Well, my favorite team of the four has always been the Phillies. And they had quite a history prior to expansion. They began the century with a very good team. They really were. In 1900, they finished in third place. In 1901, they had their best team to that point in time, winning 83 games and 140-game schedule, and finished second to, And then from then on, with the exception of two seasons, and I think this is where they were their strongest at any point in their history. 15 and 60. 50 could arguably be the best team, but I think the strongest period.
Okay, all right,
yeah, was a 15, 16, and 17. And 15 they won their first pennant and won 90 games. The first time they'd won that many, on a 154-game schedule. And the following year they posted 91 wins and finished a close second to the Dodgers. And then in 17 they won 87 games. And at that point they got rid of Pete Alexander, the anchor of their pitching staff, one of the greatest pitchers of all time. He was taken away by the First World War and ended up being traded. And that team became from a top contender to an instant doormat, and they remained that until, as you pointed out, the 1950 Phils. Al, why don't you tell us about that team? I loved it.
Okay, the 49 team was the first outside of the 1932 team, which I think finished 78 and 76. That was the only above 500 team that they had between 1918 and 1948. The only winning season. 49, they had a winning season. 50, they had what they called the Whiz Kids. And the Carpenter ownership who took over from, I don't remember, it was still Jerry Nugent at that point. But
Billy Cox, actually.
He got thrown out by Landis.
Right.
Yeah.
The only man that bet that team, a last place team, and that in itself, he got him down. But
so they wound up in 50. They had Robert. These guys were all young at that point. Robin Roberts, Kurt Simmons, as the two pitchers, and the four position players were Richie Ashburn, Del Ennis, Granny Hammer, and Puddinhead Jones, and they stayed with them with the Phillies until Ennis was traded to the Cardinals after the 56 season. And they played very, very well. And Dick Sisler in the final game against the Dodgers, if it was Ebbets Field, and if the Dodgers had won the game, it would have forced a three-game playoff, but they didn't. Dick Sisler had a home run off Don Newcomb in the 10th inning, and the Phillies wound up winning the pennant. And then, of course, they got swept by the Yankees in the World Series. But one of the things that struck me while I was researching this, They had 11 seasons of over 100 or more losses, and 6 seasons where, if you throw in 1961, which was still an 8-team league, National League, they had 6 teams that won under 50 games.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, including a stretch from 1938 to 1942, where they only won as many as 50 once.
Yeah, they were an incredibly bad team, and coupled with the Philadelphia A's in the American League, which also had a long string of bad teams in the 30 and the teens and some in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. It was not a time to be a Philadelphia ball fan unless you were a masochist, because you weren't going to see a winning team. It's very, very unlikely. But looking at their total record, what would you say pre-expansion? What would you say their worst team was?
Oh, God,
I have a favorite.
Probably 28.
Well, it's 28. They were pretty bad.
Yeah.
The only reason I would go with 1945, 2018 lost 109 games. So in terms of win-loss record, they definitely were the worst. But 2018 still had some pretty good ball players. And 45 was the last wartime season. And the Phillies lost 108 games. And that was really a terrible team. They were dead last. They're incredibly, they did have some named players, one in particular, and that happened to be a guy who, of all their pitchers in 20 or more innings that season, had the best whip on the staff. He also had the most career home runs on the team that year. In fact, he had more
Jimmy
career
Fox.
home runs. Exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, he had a pretty decent season for a guy his age, even in wartime. Didn't play a lot, didn't play every game. Only had a little over 200 at bats, but he had 7 homers and went 1-0 as a pitcher, and he closed out his career in comparison to other guys like Wayner and guys with similar period of time. He closed out his career with a respectable season. So Chuck Klein was terrible in his last season.
Because they weren't in Baker Bowl in this last season.
No, they weren't. But but the Phillies in 45, they were playing in the Shibe Park, and the Phillies and A's between them, and they were just horrible. But I agree with you, Alan. Probably the 50 team was definitely the most exciting to watch. I think the 15 team behind Alexander was a very, very tough team, and I think they had one of the most underrated managers of all time, and Pat Moran. He went on to win the pennant again in 1919 with the Reds, and very tainted World Series. He took it with the Reds, but Moran had something of a drinking problem and died young, and didn't really put together the total career stats that a manager would have to normally to make the Hall of Fame. So even though he had these 2 pennant winners on different teams, and they're the first 2 pennant winners, actually, and first two teams representing their city to win a National League pennant. The Phillies in 15, and then the Reds in 19. The Reds had previously won a pennant in the American Association in 1882.
82, yeah, right. The 2-game World Series, yeah.
Yeah, and they, but so I think, but they were a fun team to watch. And they had a guy named Gabby Kravitz who was definitely the leading power hitter prior to Babe Ruth in Major League Baseball. He had 24 home runs one year,
but that's
which was
Ball.
incredible. in Baker Bowl, but he was a right-handed hitter.
Oh,
So he didn't get to yeah, he was a right-handed hitter, and they had a short distance to right field, but they had a towering fence.
Oh, yeah.
And the fence led to a lot of doubles, but not that many home runs by left-handed hitters. And Kravitz tailored his swing, particularly at home, so that he could hit with power to right field. And most of his home runs went over that screen. And he put together a very, very good career with the Phillies, and was probably their most popular player and best-known player outside of Alexander and Chuck Klein prior to the Whiz Kids.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how Alexander put up those 7 years pitching in that place.
Yeah.
To me, I rate him above Christy Mathewson.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he never was playing with teams that had the kind of quality the Giants did.
No,
when Mathewson was in his prime, and Alexander then went on to pitch for both the Cubs and the Cardinals, and had some good seasons with both teams, and I think he and Mathewson are tied in career wins.
373. That's been there forever. Yeah. It probably will be there forever the way things are done now. Yeah.
Yeah, I would expect that to last too. But yeah, of the two, I'd rather have had Alexander on my team if I had one game to play for the pennant. And Mathewson actually did have one game to play for the pennant, and that was in 1908, and he lost it to the Cubs, and the Cubs ended up going to the 1908 series and won it.
Yeah, Mathewson. Yeah, a little diversion. Once after Mathewson won, they had the 3 shutouts in 1905. His record in the World Series was 2-5.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but the Phillies, I think, were, even as bad as they were, I think they always had some interesting players. They always have guys who could hit and not field, or vice versa, or pitchers who were, space cadets, or they always had some funny guys in their team, and probably going to the Baker Bowl, even though you knew you were probably going to see your home team lose, was kind of a fun experience. I don't know if it could be called that in Shibe Park in some of those years, because the A's teams were not fun to watch at all. They were pretty bad, but definitely of the 4 teams we're talking about here today, prior to expansion and not considering the 19th century, the Phillies were the worst of the 4. And they're over by far.
The 2 things in 1930. They hit 350, which is, of course, the year of the hitter. They hit 315 as a team and won 52 games.
Yeah.
They had a pitcher named Wes Sweetland, who still has the record for worst ERA at 7.71. And if you look at Chuck Klein's splits between home and road when they were playing in Baker Bowl, they're not very, very impressive. They're unbelievable, in fact.
Yeah, it is. But as Klein learned to take advantage of that short fence, early in his career, there wasn't that much distance between his home and road home run stats. But the longer he played with the Phillies, the more advantage he was being able to take. And then when he went to the Cubs and got hurt his first year, and he was with them in 34, pulled a hamstring, and was never really the same player after that. He became labeled a Baker Bowl phenom, and he started hitting again when he went back to the Phillies for 1936. And then you look at his numbers after the Phillies moved to Shibe Park, they declined rapidly. They did, yeah. And he didn't keep himself in shape at all, and he was kind of a tragic figure, really, and I view him as that anyway. And that as a kid, I was always dazzled by his stats and and stories about him. Because I met people who had actually seen him play, and got a chance to talk to Dick Bartell one night about him. And Dick Bartell felt that Klein was really a much greater player than he was given credit for. And I think at that point, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not even sure, I know Klein had made the Hall of Fame, but at the point I talked to Dick, but it took him a long, long time to get in. And finally, his stats were just too great to not include him. Who should we move on to next?
Yeah, well, I just want to make one thing. I know it's breaking the rule a little bit, but the National League in 1961 was an 8-team league. They didn't add the Mets in Houston until 1962. In 1961, the Phillies won 47 games. And they had a 23-game losing streak, which is the post-1900 record. And even though the Orioles gave it a good shot this year, the Diamondbacks gave it a real good shot this year. But that team deserves to be remembered. And Choo Choo Coleman, who was one of the catchers on that team, was so bad that they sent him to the minors.
Yeah.
He couldn't even stick with and of course when he came to the Mets in those expansion years, he became one of the icons. Okay, want to go to the Dodgers or Giants next? We'll save the Braves for last.
Okay, sounds good. You want to do the Dodgers?
Yeah.
I can talk about their worst team.
1908.
Well, I like 19, and 08 was bad. 08 was really bad. But I think 1905, here you are with Ned Hanlon, the great Ned Hanlon, Hall of Fame manager, who's been with the club by then he came to them in 99 and won pennants in 99 and 1900 and continued to have post a good record in 1901. And then his team was riddled by, the Dodgers were riddled by American League clubs who, pirated away their best players, paid them more money. And Hanlon, by the 1905 season, had almost nothing left of the teams that, the kind of fantastic teams that he had assembled with the Orioles and then later with Brooklyn. So I think the 1905 team, I don't know, but why would you pick the 1908 team?
Because they didn't I know that was the ultimate dead ball. Didn't that team hit around 220? And I think they lost, I'm pretty sure they lost 100 games, over 100 games.
Yeah, the 1905 team had, it was pretty much the same. They were a 100-game loser too. I think they were the first team from Brooklyn ever to finish in last place, representing Brooklyn. And it got bad. It got worse as the dead ball era wore on. But then they turned it around, and I don't know. At the point that you and I come into the picture as baseball fans, they really never had a bad team.
I know, yeah.
They were always contenders, more than contenders. If you look at their history from 1946 through 1953, they were right there every year except 1948.
Yeah, 41 and 42 before the Warriors. They won once in the 42. They won 104 games and wound up blowing a 9-game lead to the Cardinals.
I know, and I think that 42 team, if it hadn't been for that unfortunate finish, I think the 42 team could make a case for being the best Brooklyn team of all time. But because of it, it's hard to go against some of the teams in the 50s. The 53 team.
The 53 team was the best. Yeah.
Yeah, they won the most games. They won the pennant rather easily. And then they with just a couple of changes here and there, in 1946 they were part of the first pennant playoff series ever.
Yeah.
When they and the Cardinals tied for first place, and they had a best of 3 playoffs, and the Cardinals took them out in 2 games, and then in '50, if they won the last game of the season, they would have been involved in another 3-game playoff, and they were involved in a 3-game playoff in '51 with the Giants, and again they lost. And you look at
I seem to remember that. Yeah.
yeah. You look at the Dodgers. There really have only been 4 pennant playoffs in National League history, unless I'm mistaken. I think that the Dodgers were involved in all 4. You know, they were in 46, 51, 59,
and 62,
and 62, and they won in 59 with a very suspect team. They only won 86 games. On the 154-game schedule, and then won 2 more games against the Braves to take the pennant. But their 88 wins, you know, in the average year would probably be a 3rd place finish. You know, and most. Yeah,
the '53 Dodgers. I mean, they, you know, all the core players, Snyder, Hodges. Ferrillo, Robinson, Campanella, Reese had tremendous years. They won 105 games and lost 49. And they won it very, very easily. And what happened was the Yankees beat them in 6 games in the World Series. I was 10 years old, and I watched most of that, and I was thrilled. But anyway, what happened in 48 and 54, 48, Jackie Robinson came in overweight from a banquet circuit. And the Dodgers had no catcher because the regular catcher in 47, Bruce Edwards, had a bad arm. And DeRocha started getting into it with Rickey because he wanted Campanella. DeRocha wanted Campanella because he had no catching. And Rickey was using Campanella to break the call line in the Old American Association minor league. And so that led to some big disagreements, and that's when DeRocha jumped from the Dodgers to the Giants, which must have been an incredible shock because I was only 5 years old at the time. I wasn't aware of of that.
Yeah.
But and in '54, what happened? And one of the big stories I thought was Don Newcomb, because I did a talk in 1988 at the SABR convention in Minneapolis on players who lost time to being in the service during the Korean War. And Newcomb was coming off a 20-9 season, and he was drafted. And he went to the Army for 2 years, and he was furious. He thought it was racist because they didn't draft Robin Roberts or a few other pitchers that were in his age bracket. And he came out for 1954 and had a bad year. It was 9-8, and the other factor that year was Campanella had a bad hand injury and went from being the MVP in 1953 to hitting .217. And I think maybe even been .207 in 1954, and he was, and they just weren't good enough to beat the Giants. But that's it. They could have had a streak from 49 through 56.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of all that but you're right about Newcomb. I hadn't thought of it quite. Yeah, he did. And then he came. He had that great season in '56.
Yogi took care of him in the World Series, and then he started boozing again.
Yeah, he really was again the same kind of pitcher. But
no, yeah.
I remember as a kid, and I was in grade school listening to the World Series on the radio, and the '49 series. in the first game it was between the Yankees and the Dodgers, and Newcomb, a rookie, was starting for the Dodgers, and it was a zip game until Tommy Henrik had a solo homer in the ninth. And I didn't know much about the National League. I was from Cleveland, followed the American League closely, and the Dodgers. I knew the teams in the National League, and probably even at that point, like the Pirates and the Phillies, the best of all of them in terms of following them, because of guys like Ralph Kiner, and I also like Richie Ashburn. But I really, I didn't know anything about Newcomb until I was listening to that game. They were talking about it, and I had, that was for a rookie. And he always was accused, later in his career, of not being there for the big game.
Oh yeah.
Whenever there was, but his first big game, he was all there.
He had an 0-4 lifetime World Series record with an ERA of over 7. And of course, he lost the last game in 1950, and he couldn't finish the last game in 1951.
No.
But when Berra, when he had that great year in '56, he was 27-7 MVP, Cy Young Award winner for the first year was awarded. And Yogi took him deep 3 times in that series. Took him. The Dodgers won the second game of that series 13-8. Berra hit a grand slam. The Yankees had a 6-0 lead early in the game. Berra hit a grand slam off of him. And then when they played the last game, Berra hit 2 2-run home runs off of him. And the Yankees won that game 9-0. And after that, it was all downhill.
Yeah.
He wound up playing in Japan.
Yeah.
For a year or two.
Yeah, I remember seeing him with Cleveland when he was in the Indians for a while.
But he did community relations with the Dodgers for years, and he did recover from his drinking problem.
Yeah, he did, and it's. But going back to the 1905 team, I was just looking at it at a glance, and that talk about a lack of hitting. I mean, you had a guy like Harry Lumley who did lead the National League in home runs one year, and Harry Lumley was on the team in 1905, and you would figure he would be their biggest hitter. But you look through the lineup, and I have never met anyone who could answer the question, who led the Dodgers in RBI in 1905? There's nobody I know I've ever asked that question who's even come up with I guess people have guessed Lumley and Tim Jordan, who also was with Brooklyn in those years, and a little bit of a power hitter, led the league in homers. But the guy who led the team in 1905 was a guy named Emil Batch with 49 RBI. Emil Batch, yeah. But I love questions like that because you really have to dig to find it. But now the baseball ref has got everything right out there, right out in the open for everybody to find. You can quickly scroll to a team and pin these things down. But it was fun as a kid to see like that.
Speaking of Emils, I think the Cubs had a major league record which will never be broken in 1949. Or 48, they had 3 of them. They had Dutch Leonard, Emil Cush, and Emil Verbin.
Yeah. And they were all pretty. Well, Cush didn't have much of a career, but Verbin was a pretty good ball player.
The Antelope, yeah. And Dutch Leonard had a very good career. He bounced around a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember as a kid hoping that he would last long enough to win 200 games. He didn't. He didn't quite make it. But I used to love, I never got to see him play, unfortunately. I don't think I ever got to see.
Now I'll never forget Emil Batch.
Yeah.
Wasn't the 08 team sitting worse?
Yeah, it was worse. It was just about as bad as it gets. but that was the 19-8 season. If you had a 240 team batting average, you were going to be in the running because there was nobody, really, guys like Cobb and Speaker and and Crawford, guys like Wagner, guys like that were breaking into the 300s, even 350s. But the average ball player, you can look through some of the lineups and you could find entire infield where you wouldn't find a guy who hit over 340 or 240. And some teams you can find an outfield that didn't hit, and nobody hit 240 in the outfield either. So,
was Bill Bergen there at that point?
Oh yeah, Bill Bergen and Lou Ritter were the two catchers. And, and Bergen actually had a pretty good year. He had one of his better years. He hit 191, and I think you could point to that with pride because Phillies not that far below the team batting average.
Yeah, I had the first Tuck and Thompson when that came out in 1952, I think, or 3, whatever. Parents bought for me. I'm looking at it, and all they had for the hitters was games and average. They didn't have anything more, lifetime. I remember getting to Bill Bergen and looking at and to say 100 games and this and that, and he I think he had a career 139. How the hell is this guy staying in the majors for that long?
No, he's a great. I unfortunately never got to see him play, but from all I hear, he was a great defensive catcher, and he did get a lot out of some pitchers who are no names today. They had, some incredible ERAs. They didn't win many games, but nobody hit for them. So they were often saddled with, 3-2, 4-3, 2-1 losses, and then their ERAs that were hovering around 200 went for naught. Anything else you should talk about with the Dodgers, or go to the Giants?
Let's go to the Giants,
Yeah.
Their worst teams, I was looking at this on reference this afternoon, their worst teams were, during or right after World War II.
Yeah. Yeah. 46, they finished last, bad last. And, they had an incredible streak, though, between 1910 and 1925, when they finished first or second in that 16-year period, every season except 1915 and 1916. And in 15, they posted the best record ever by a last-place team. I think they were well over 400, maybe over 450, around 450, if I'm not mistaken. And then the 16 team was immortalized because they won a record 26 straight games. They didn't end up being a first or second place team, but they certainly were memorable. And every other season, between 10 and 25, McGraw had the team either in first or second place. After 25, McGraw never again really put together a contender. I don't know. I think his interest kind of fell off a little bit after 25. Maybe he was already getting, some early signs of the cancer that would do him in. I don't know, but
maybe it's because he couldn't adapt to the lively ball very well.
No, that too, and I don't think he could handle Judge Landis, and Landis wasn't going to forgive much of the stuff that he did earlier, prior to Landis's arrival. There were some really scandalous things hovering around the Giants almost every year, but they did put together some great teams. And I think if you look at their totals, forgetting the 19th century when they also had some very, very good teams. I think the 1914 was probably, arguably their best team. And the irony of it was, because John Brush, the Giants owner, there was no World Series that year. There'd been a series in 1903, But Brush
Yeah, there's also McGraw, because I did a talk on 1904 when, after the 1994 series was canceled because of the strike. There's a book I have, the year there wasn't a World Series or something like that. It's old. It came out before 94. It goes right through the whole 1904 season. And they said in the book, I don't know how true this is, that the Giants were afraid of having to face the Highlanders.
Yeah, the Highlanders were definitely a contender, and you're right. There was. I think there was that possibility, and it did put them off because they did feel in control of New York, and for a team that had been moved to the city just a year before to be, pushing up against them in the World Series, I don't think sat too well. And I think they were not that eager to play. You're right.
Yeah, it also said in the book that the Highlanders were supposed to play a doubleheader with Boston here, but they had rented Hilltop Park, which was their home field back then, to Columbia University for a football game. So they wound up shifting the games to Boston. They lost both of them.
Yeah, it's that was an interesting season, and not enough. I don't think enough has been done about it. I haven't read the book that you have. I'd be interested in taking a look at it.
Yeah, it's quite old, so I'll see if it's available on Amazon or one of their back deals or eBay. And I don't even remember who wrote it. But the thing is that I know after World War II, that team, during World War II and after World War II, that team's pretty bad.
Yeah, it was. They didn't have much pitching, and I was fading. I wasn't even a good hitter during the Warriors. I mean, he had some terrible seasons, and he only kept playing. Because he was a manager, he can put himself in. He really was no longer the guy that should have had a play.
And then, after 48, DeRocher told Stalin to back up the truck because all they had was lead-footed home run hitters. Yeah,
their 47 team, I remember, broke the record, the excellent record at that time, most team home runs. And they had the immortal Clint Hart on.
The Hondo Hurricane, yeah.
Yeah, he got an incredible amount of attention as a rookie, and they had some pretty good ball players. They had interesting pitching staffs, and
they got Larry Jansen in 47 after he won 30 games in the Coast League, and then but Jansen, Lockman, and Bobby Thompson were basically the only three that DeRocher kept from, wanted to keep on the team after the purge.
Yeah.
And of course, when they made that trade for Stanky and Dark with the Braves after 49, that solidified it.
Yeah, that did make a big change. Yeah. What do you think? What do you see any bad teams in the 30s or 40s other than the Warriors? In the 50s, they were always pretty decent. They had, of course, won the pennant in '54, and then when they first moved out to San Francisco in '58, they were a competitive team right away. They were bad in New York in '57, but
I have a theory, and it's just a theory because there's no way to really prove it. that when they moved out to San Francisco in '58, they had a whole bunch of rookies that made the team. Cepeda, Philip Alou, Jim Davenport, and maybe a few others. And I felt that they were held down in the minors in '57, so the team could stink. Because the only assets they had in '57 were Willie Mays and Johnny Antonelli. That was it.
I did see that team play. I saw the 59 team play. So fortunately got to see a game in LA Coliseum with Davenport homered, I think, in the 15th inning over the short screen in left field to win the game. And that was that was the first time I was actually seeing the Giants or the Dodgers in a live game, up close and personal. I'd seen them on TV and I'd seen them in spring training, but never in a game before. And that was my first look at Mays in an actual game. I remember, and that was a real treat. But they were a fun team, I think, in the 50s for the most part. And DeRocher, I don't know. I think he got pretty much everything he could out of most of those clubs.
Yeah, he left after 55.
Yeah.
And Bill Rigney took over and was managing them the first couple of years in San Francisco.
Yeah. Do you want to move on to the Braves?
Yes. Okay, I think this is pretty simple. And we're including Milwaukee because they moved to Milwaukee in '53 and played there during the rest of the pre-expansion. And I think the best team was the 1957 team, and the worst team was the 1935 team.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And if we exclude Milwaukee, I take the 1948 team over the 1915 team. Or the
1914, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, at 14, they won the series against a demoralized, and who knows why, A's team that didn't play at all up to their level. And
was that because of the Federal League?
I don't know. There was something was wrong between Mac and that team.
Yeah.
Whenever Mac had a really good team, it always started to fall apart really quickly. Guys started to feel they should be paid more. They should be paid more attention to. They didn't regard him with the full respect he thought he deserved. All kinds of things went on, but he just couldn't hold those good teams together for more than 2 or 3 years. And after 14, of course, the A's just fell right to the bottom of the barrel for years and years to come. But the Braves team in 14 came out of nowhere. They were in last place on July 4th, and they were a decent record. They were good. They were still very, very, very close to the first division, and they came on strong in the latter half, and they pulled it together with Rabbit Moranville and Johnny Evers, and that was a really, really fine in double play combination, and they had decent players at every position, not great players, and they had a good manager overall, George Stallings, and he kept them together for a couple of years, a pretty decent team. But after that, they really fell apart, and by 1935, they've been on the downswing pretty much for a long time, but. But
didn't the Giants basically operate with the Braves like the Yankees operated with the Kansas City A's during the 50s?
You almost wondered about that, didn't you? Because they did make some kind of weird trades, transactions, but Antonelli, it's I don't know. That was kind of strange the way that happened, and but I wanted to say something about what was I thinking about the 54 team? I don't know. I can't remember what the moment I was thinking about, but
What, the 57 team?
No, not the 57 team. Well, the 48 team. The 48 team. They lost the series 6 games to Cleveland. I think the two teams were about equal, and the difference was that Jeff Heath is having a remarkable comeback season with the Braves, and he broke his ankle. I think it was in the last game of the season, sliding into home plate, and he, of course, was disabled for the entire World Series. And Heath was the heart of their lineup as far as power hitting went, and their replacements. They had to pull up a guy who wasn't even eligible for the series at the beginning, a guy named Mark Rickard, who was made eligible and ended up playing quite a bit in the series because their outfield was very, very patchy once Heath was down. And if Heath had been there for the Braves for the entire series, I have a feeling they might have won that series. They could have done it, I think. So,
yeah, the only reason I know about Mark Ricker at all was because he had a card in the early series of 1952 Topps as a White Sox.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I ever heard of the name.
Yeah, but Heath had a grudge against Cleveland because he started with Cleveland, and he'd always had trouble with Cleveland fans. He had a terrible year in 1940 when they should have won the pennant. And he had great seasons in 39 and 41. And if he'd had one of those seasons in 40, they definitely would have beaten out the Tigers. And the fans always got on Heath more than they did on a lot of their other players. And Cleveland ended up trading him, and he spent most of his post-war career with the Senators and with the Browns, and he was down there in the pits. And then in 48, he went to the Braves, and he had a great comeback season. And never really could come back from the ankle injury. He wasn't, he did play in 49, but he wasn't really able to keep up the pace anymore.
Well, they missed Stanky half that season, who had a broken ankle, I think.
Yeah, that was Stanky got hurt in midseason. They had to use guys like Bob Sturgeon and Civvy Sisti, and they really were patchy at second base. Dark was at short, and Ellie was at third, and they had Torgerson and Ray Sanders. I think they platooned them at first base, and they weren't that strong a team, but they had Spahn and Sane and 2 days of rain, if you believe that. But their other pitchers were pretty decent. They had both Vern Bickford and Bill Voiselle, who had pretty good years and did pretty well in the series. And so I think it would have been much different. It could have been a very different series if Heath had only been eligible.
Yeah,
but
the 50s.
One last thing on the 35 team. The 35 team was really bad, and they came down to the end of the season, and they called up this guy out of nowhere. And his name was Johnny Tyler. And he played he played enough to get about 54 at bat. And he ended up with a nickname after the 35 season of Ty Tyler, which was a play on both Ty Cobb and Ty Tyler. And after the 35 season, I think he hit like 340, and he had great OPS. He had the highest OPS in the team, I think, except maybe Wally Berger had a higher OPS, but he was close. And he never played a single game after that. In fact, the Braves didn't even take him to spring training, I don't think, in 36.
Johnny Tyler?
Johnny Tyler. Johnny
Wasn't he president? Wasn't he president once?
Yeah, maybe.
The Braves had something similar like that when they were in Milwaukee with Hurricane Hazel.
Oh, yeah.
Who came up when Billy Bruton tore his leg up midway through 1957. They shifted Henry Aaron to center field, and they brought up Hazel, and he had over 400 for the 2 months. And then he helped them win the pennant, and he was hot as hell. I mean, I really remember this. And then he went to spring training, hit 150, and the next year was sold to Detroit and just faded out as quickly as he had emerged. But that team, the '57 team, was pretty solid. Crandall, Adcock, Red Cheney, who had gotten in a trade from the Giants, who solidified their infield and led the National League of Hits that year at the ripe old age of 34. Johnny Logan, Eddie Matthews, Hall of Famer, and the outfield was for the last part of the year was Wes Covington, Henry Aaron in center field, and Hazel Wright. Bruton was out half the season with that knee, and Eddie Pafko, I think, was also on that team as a backup outfielder. And the pitching, of course, they had Spahn and Burdett. Spahn won the Cy Young Award that year, and Burdett had a very good year. Burdett, you look at his numbers from 56 through 61, and he was one of the best pitchers in the National League during that time frame. And Buell didn't help much that year. He had a bad arm. But I'm sorry, Buell didn't have the bad arm until 1958. They won it the pennant fairly easily over the Dodgers and the Cardinals and the Dodgers, and this was a makeup for '56 when they lost the pennant and the last weekend of the season to the Dodgers. And so that team and they beat the Yankees in 7 games in the World Series, and that was, that team, if you throw them in, because, it is pre-expansion, I think it was the best pre-expansion team that the Braves has had, maybe, not all the way back to the 1890s. I think what happened with them was that Arthur Soden, who was the owner for years and the power behind the reserve clause, wouldn't pay his players, and most of them wound up jumping to the American League. The same thing with the guy Rogers, Arnold Rogers in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Yeah, so Philadelphia, Brooklyn, they were all relieved. The Pirates were riddled. All the National League teams lost key players to American League clubs either before or probably after 1901.
Yeah, before free agency, the only times that ball players had the upper hand were when the American League was formed and when the Federal League came in for 2 years.
Yeah, and the Players
and that was
League.
it.
Yeah, in 1890, the Players League. Well,
Players League, maybe.
Yeah, it was really the last when the Federal League was the last time, definitely until free agency did come into existence. But the Braves teams in the 1890s, all in all, I think were the best teams in the National League. They were superior even to the Orioles teams. If you go season by season, they won more pennants and they were strong every year. They didn't really have too many weak spots anywhere. I think Frank Salee may have been the best manager in that time period because he came over to the Cubs after leaving Boston after not being able to get along very well with Soden, and joined the Cubs and became their manager. And he really fashioned, to a large degree, that Cubs team that Frank Chance inherited when Salee's health started to fail, and he had to leave the game. And Chance had that team in 1906, and then again in 7 and 8. They won 3 straight pennants in 2 series. So, I think that for the decade, the Braves decade was definitely the 90s, but a little before our time.
Yeah, and also a number of years ago, I read a biography of Kid Nichols, and he's a Hall of Famer that basically is invisible to most people. And if he had not gone to the American Association, the minor league for 2 years, in I think 1903 and 1904, he would have won 400 games Might have won 400 games.
Yeah, he would have. I think almost undoubtedly. If he had jumped to the American League, especially if he had jumped to the Boston club, and the Boston had gotten both Cy Young and Kid Neckel on their pitching staff, they would have probably swept the first 5 pennants in American League history. Because those two really were still very formidable in those years. And Nichols did come back to the Phillies, and I think he won 20 games one year, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, he won more games than any pitcher in the 19th century, in the 1890s.
Yeah, more than Young.
Ask people that trivia.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. And he was very underrated. Well, this has been fun once again.
Oh yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I got my chance to bring everybody up to date on Emil Batch, and so. I'm sure that trivia question is going to go around. Maybe he'll ask it at one of the Sabre conventions. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But it's always a pleasure, and hopefully it won't be too soon. It'll be soon that we can do the Pirates, Reds, Cardinals, and Cubs. Yeah, they're a fun team. I'm really looking forward to them. Okay. Thanks, Take care, and it's always a pleasure. Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.